I came to art therapy as a fine arts student. I had been volunteering in nursing homes and rehabilitation centers, primarily with people who had experienced strokes or traumatic brain injuries. And it was fascinating to me to see, as a fine arts student, how powerful visual messages and symbol systems were in increasing cognitive interactions with the clients I was working with. So I'm going to present to you today on international art therapy and some of my experiences. The American Art Therapy Association and the field of art therapy is a relatively young field in the mental health arena. This year, the American Art Therapy Association turns 48 years old. So as a field, we're young, but the idea of creating art for ritual and healing and communication and celebration is not new. So I wanted to share from my young field some of the influences that I've had in international art therapy. My dear friend and mentor, Dr. Frances Anderson, has been presenting art therapy workshops around the world for decades before she became the first art therapist to serve as a Fulbright scholar. And doing so, she created workshops for people who were working with special needs populations so they could experience the healing of art making themselves. And one of the important lessons that Dr. Anderson has shared with me, and I've been able to take into my international work, is how carefully we have to choose media when we're working internationally. So the ethics of bringing novel or exciting art materials to a country where that's never going to be available once we leave is really an unethical situation. Heidi Bardot is the director of the art therapy program at George Washington University, and she's been instrumental in creating art therapy graduate programs in Croatia, the UAE, and in India. And she's also worked with immigrants and other populations from Lebanon. And one of the things that Heidi teaches is that we really need to think about sustainability when we work internationally. So going into a country and doing art therapy with populations that are at risk or are suffering in the aftermath of a disaster really isn't helpful if there's no sustainability of that effort. So like my organization, she really focuses on the train the trainer model. Dr. Jordan Potash lived and worked in Hong Kong for many years, and in a recent program that he co-authored and co-facilitated, he invited members of the community in Hong Kong who had a diagnosis with a mental illness to create art with the prompt of what I want others to know about me. When these works went on exhibit, in the gallery where they were exhibited and the community visited, the community was invited to create response art to the pieces that they saw. And what the authors of the manuscript that he and his co-authors have worked on found is that the dialogue that was initiated helped to reduce stigma associated with mental health issues and also to increase empathy. Yasmin Awas has had the opportunity to actually become immersed in the mental health systems of a couple of different countries, including Saudi Arabia and Japan. And one of the things that she talks about in a recent article is how important it is for art therapists and folks from related mental health fields to advocate for art therapy services when they're not available to special needs populations. I also wanted to mention Kathy Moon. Kathy was asked to participate in programming in Africa, and as a scholar and an art therapy educator and an artist, she went into those situations really thinking about, and she's so beautifully articulated the idea that she was a guest in these communities. And it was only through building the relationships with the people that she was invited by, and then also by breathing in the textures of the environment where she was visiting, that she could create collaborative art activities with those communities, that she could actually become a part of that. Okay. Art therapy provides opportunities to experience mastery over traumatic experiences. This is important. And one of the things, I came into the field after working as a fine artist with people with special needs and understanding that I needed to study this formally. As a young art therapist, my primary research interest and writing interest was in medical art therapy. So I was looking at if art therapy could reduce anxiety in children hospitalized for specific diagnoses. In the case of my dissertation, sickle cell disease. And I was able to translate what I had learned in really important ways into natural disaster work. So what I found was that in medical art therapy, there's an event that precedes the hospitalization. So it could be an accident or an injury or a disease process. And then there's the trauma of being in the hospital environment where things are done to you and for you. And in natural disaster work, there's the event like a war or a tornado or a tsunami or an earthquake. And then there's the aftermath of that lack of normalcy in life. So as the clinical director of Communities Healing Through Art, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Dr. Baxter Garcia to plan ways to follow a train-the-trainer model, to work carefully with organizations that are already active on the ground. If we just jump into Haiti, for example, to provide help, and then we need assistance getting around or clean water, we're part of the problem. One of the things that I've learned, and these next couple of slides are from all kinds of different post-disaster work, natural disaster work, it's really important to provide materials that children and families can use to create, undo, redo, glue, bind buildings. So if an earthquake or a tornado or a landslide has taken buildings off of a landscape, to be able, as a young person, to be able to make sure those are strong and firm and that we understand that they're going to hold together is really important. Lots of glue in this kind of work. Lots and lots of glue to make things strong. And if you don't provide specific materials that are building materials, individuals will make buildings from what's available. These are examples from work that I did on a second or third trip to Haiti. Again, those relationships with organizations are really important. I was traveling with a graduate student, Deborah Cotterman, and she decided that the activity that she wanted to make sure she introduced while we were there was making figures from found objects, aluminum foil, and some art materials. And so all the children created figures. And on this side, you can see a figure that a little girl made, and she's all decorated and even carrying a purse. And on the other side, a little boy acted out with his figure and a figure that he borrowed from one of his friends, a scene of a footballer, a soccer player, a national hero, passing out water in the camps where hundreds and thousands and even millions of people were living after the earthquake. And so you can see the little blue plastic bag peeking out between his fingers. That's how water was delivered. So in a little vacuum sealed bag. And in fact, the water was safer to drink right after the earthquake than before the earthquake because it was in these sealed containers. And so in mastering this experience, he's acting out the experience of that sharing of water and taking care of another by having his little figure give water to the other little figure. Art therapy provides opportunities to contain powerful, painful, and life-changing experiences. Sometimes these containers are metaphorical, and sometimes they're literal. Spontaneously, kids are experiencing trauma, whether it's a heavy-duty trauma like an earthquake or a tsunami, or a medical procedure like an inoculation, all traumatic in some way, yes. They'll create a boundary for themselves. And so I've called these organizational caterpillars because they're very often kind of long and thin. I haven't established a theory for why they're often long and thin, but I do see that there are different levels of mastery of filling in these organizational caterpillars. Often they look like stained glass when they're finished. And if we do provide an outline, the same thing happens. So those two images were from two different natural disasters. This is from work that Frances Anderson did with children who had survived sexual trauma in South America. And you can see that that same kind of attempts at organizing thought, organizing the psyche is taking place. Sometimes the media itself is all we give as a prompt. So rather than giving a direction, like the create art that represents what you want others to know about you, in this case, I simply handed out round pieces of paper, and the direction was then provided by the child. And in this case, there was that same containing by making a strong border around the outside. You can see that the little fellow on the top was really concerned about a medical protocol that he was going to experience, and he was afraid that he was going to lose a lot of blood in this process. And sometimes we're very purposeful about providing containers that can be decorated and elaborated and made special. And so in the jar, this was letters in a bottle. So the directive was to create an art piece on a bottle that could hold messages to someone. And the kids were able to pick who it was that they wanted to send those messages to, as well as what they wanted those messages to be. So for some it was their future selves. For some it was their past selves, lessons that they wished they'd learned. For some it was people who had died, and others it was people that they hadn't met yet, but they were longing to meet. And the example here is actually a t-shirt. And I've used these in cases of grief, death of a loved one, where the symbol on the outline on the t-shirt provides the container with an opening in case something needs to spill out, but it doesn't necessarily need to do that. It's up to the individual. Of course, when doing any kind of wearable art, it's important to have a conversation about when we wear them as well. So if you're literally going to wear your emotions on a sleeve, then when are you going to do that? If you're thinking about someone that day and you want to be asked about it, you want to talk about that person, then you just wear it over your jeans. But maybe you're thinking about it and you feel like if someone asked you, it would just be too much. So you might wear it as an undershirt. And so these are things that we talk about. Art therapy provides opportunities to recenter, reframe, and problem solve. This is one of my favorite examples of problem solving, and this is from the Andaman Islands of India following the Andaman Sumatra earthquake. And this little fella did some wonderful problem solving. So this figure here with the tree on it is actually a boat. And boats that are going to be out to sea for a long time often have trees on them because they're just reminders of home, and when you're on the deck, then they feel comfortable. But what he's actually done is not tie the boat to the land, but he's tied the dock and the land to the land. So he's problem solving. He's making sure that he's holding ground down. Sometimes children will think about before and after. So if I can just, kind of like I was doing about 10 minutes ago, if I can visualize myself in the after part of this scary thing, then I can make it to that stage. And sometimes we just go to our happy places. If this is too much, too powerful for me to hold on to right now, I'm going to go bounce on the trampoline in my backyard in the green jumper and flowered leggings that I'm wearing right now. Through art therapy, internal psychological processes can be demonstrated visually rather than verbally. This is really important, right? Because symbol systems are a part of how we communicate. And it's important to think of symbol systems as universal, cultural, and personal. And this also related to my work with children in hospitals. If we give children age-appropriate, accurate information, and adults too, then they can form age-appropriate, accurate anxiety responses. Excuse me. So we can't tell children who've just experienced a tsunami, this will never happen again. But we can say people all over the world are working on warning systems to make sure it doesn't. You can see that this little guy, this is an elephant helping with the cleanup, and everything's looking pretty good, but he's still not quite convinced that everything's going to stay where it should. And these images are important, and they're from all over the world. One of the ways I began to think about the clutter of debris after a natural earthquake or a natural disaster can actually be seen in the artwork too. That this chaos kind of disorganizes thinking. And we see this behaviorally in lack of sleep, acting out, and different symptoms of post-traumatic stress. This was sent to me by an art therapist here in Kansas, who's the mother of a child who she thought had a discussion after the tornadoes in Manhattan, and she thought her daughter was doing pretty good with understanding that their house was only a little bit damaged, but these are the kind of drawings that the little girl was creating. She was still really concerned about tornadoes. And it provides opportunities for us to interact with one another. So I always tell my students that if I had lots of research money at the university, one of the things I'd love to look at is the impact of altruism on mental health. And so we look for opportunities to do that in the places where we work. In this case, these are children in Haiti making t-shirts for other members of the community. And we helped, through the director of the program, to identify people in their community who needed clothing to wear. Anytime I do this with adults or children, I also give them an opportunity to make something that they keep. These are my beautiful graduate students who this year created messages of peace and love and unity and welcome to send to the Somali population in Garden City, Kansas. You may remember that in October, there was a thwarted terrorist attack. 3 men had been planning to bomb the community and the mosques. And so they sent these messages of love and welcome. My students also sent messages to Haiti that we hung in the delivery room of a hospital. Ellen Disanyaki talks about making special, and decorating the self is one way that we do that, what we put on. And so given materials, adults and children will do this. And we also have opportunities for reinforcement of connections that are safe ones. So I've worked in South Africa in a clinic where the virgin cleansing myth was widely believed, that intercourse with a virgin would cure the AIDS virus. And to this end, the clinic had discovered that children as young as 2 were being raped. And so often there wasn't a reporting. But if we could reinforce the connection of a non-offending parent, it gave a safe place for the child. And community installations of art can meet those same desires. So if you think of 9/11, the beautiful things that came up in New York City where people would just spontaneously make works of art. So if you're interested in art therapy, there are art therapists in this room. There are dozens in Kansas City, and you can reach out to the American Art Therapy Association. Thank you.